So this is being recorded, and we will upload this to our YouTube channel when we get a chance, or send it out to folks in some way when we get a chance that aren't able to be here. But welcome, everyone. My name is Cindy Lowry. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Greater Birmingham and the past president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Birmingham. And I'm also the director of the Alabama Rivers Alliance in my day job. And I will be your moderator tonight. And Kathy Jones, who's the head of the League of Women Voters of Alabama, president, will give us some announcements later on. She's also our technical Zoom master, so she'll be working the back end of things. And we're very excited to have a great program for you tonight. We're grateful for, I'm grateful, and I know many others are, for this wonderful environmental education series that the League of Women Voters of Alabama has been doing for the last couple of years. And I'm honored to often get to moderate these and to get to introduce you to amazing people and amazing speakers and very important issues that are facing our environment here in Alabama. So we tonight are going to talk about some nasty stuff called waste sludge or biosludge. But before we get to the nasty stuff, I get to introduce you to a very special person and speaker for us tonight who is an expert on this issue. And I really love to introduce Julie Lay to people because she's one of those people that defies, you really can't put her in a box. She defies a lot of labels and a lot of stereotypes. So if I were to tell you tonight that our speaker is a community activist, or even better, an environmental activist, that would conjure a whole lot of images in your mind about what that looks like and who that person is. And if I were to tell you that our speaker tonight is a woman who is a Christian and lives in rural Alabama and has grown up in rural Alabama and is a mother, that would probably also conjure up a lot of other images in your mind of what this person is and what she's like and what she's done, or what she might think and what she might believe and do. If I were to tell you that she's a scientist and that she had a career in spent part of her career in industrial agriculture, that might also conjure up some ideas about what this person is like. But all of those, Julie is all of those things. So to imagine like all of those things wrapped into one person, and it definitely defies any kind of labels or boxes you could put her in. She is a truly amazing person. And one of my favorite things about Julie that I love, I want to give her a chance to tell her real story and all the details of her story. And I'm not going to read you her bio because that's something you've read in the promotional materials. And she definitely has great credentials to be talking about this issue with her career in agriculture science and working in the agriculture industry in the past. She has great expertise in this issue. But my favorite thing, and truly the true most honest thing I can say about Julie, is that she's just a truly good human. She is one of those people that cares deeply about her family and her community and our state. And she cares enough to take action and to get involved, not just to talk about it or complain about it, but to actually do something about it. And she's done some pretty brave things. She's made some sacrifices in her life and her personal life that a lot of us would not be brave enough to do around this issue that she cares so much about. And she's not afraid to stand up to the folks that are threatening our environment and her community and her family. So I'll let her take it from here, but I'm just very honored to be able to introduce you to Julie Lay. She's also a board member of the Alabama Rivers Alliance, so we're very lucky to have her on our board of directors as well. Julie, I'll let you take it from here, and you tell me when you want me to share the screen.
Hey, thanks. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up.
Yep.
All right, good deal. So thank you for that introduction. That was very, very sweet of you, Cindy. So my name is Julie Lay, and Anne, do you care to mute your line for me? Oh, there you go. You muted it. Okay. Sorry about that. So my name is Julie Lay, and I'm from Guntersville, Alabama, and that's in Marshall County, which is in northeast Alabama. And like Cindy said, my bio was on the link or the invite to this meeting. But just briefly, in case some of you might not have had time to read it, I think knowing where someone comes from and knowing their background can help people know where they're coming from. So I'll briefly go over my background. So I come from an agricultural family. My grandparents were dairy, tobacco, and raised corn. My dad was a land use specialist for TVA, and his degree was in natural resources. So you can imagine what a lot of our conversation was growing up. It's around agriculture, the importance of agriculture, and where we were heading and where we came from. So that interest in agriculture led me to Auburn University, where I got a BS degree in animal science. Later on, I did some coursework towards a master's in ecotoxicology, but my husband asked me to marry him. So instead of spending money on education, I decided I needed to start making a little bit of money. So I started working after my BS degree. I started working for the poultry industry, and after my short stint working towards a master's that I didn't finish, I went back and worked in the poultry industry. And about 5 to 6 years in the poultry industry, and then after that I went to work for a large agricultural company for about 10 years, and it was so roughly 16 years in industrial agriculture that I've had, and the majority of my work was in quality, food safety, and regulatory. So keeping all that in mind kind of gives you an idea of my background and where I'm coming from as I tell this story. So in 2019, my husband called me, and he said that one of our neighbors had spread food grade fertilizer, as he was told, and it was from a poultry plant. Well, actually, he didn't tell me that when we were driving down. I'm sorry. I was coming home from work. He told me that our neighbor had spread fertilizer, and it smelled awful. And I was like, what is he talking about? And as we topped the top of the mountain, about a half a mile away from my house, the odor hit us. And it was a beautiful day in the summer, so our windows were down. We immediately rolled the windows up. And as we came closer to our house, the odor got noxious. It got worse and worse and worse as we got closer to our house. I had my boys were pretty young at the time, so I grabbed my youngest from his car seat, grabbed the other one from his car seat, and ran them both into the house. And the house was really no different than outside. It smelled awful in our house. So I started asking questions, and then that's when we called our neighbor and asked them what in the world had they spread. And he said it was food grade fertilizer from a poultry plant. Well, with my experience in the poultry plants, I knew that there was no such thing as a food grade fertilizer that we made. And there was no fertilizer that I knew of that came from our plant. So I had no idea what he was talking about. And I asked him for a SDS, a safety data sheet that you have to have for fertilizers. He said that he wasn't supplied with one. And after he asking questions, he just referred me to the company that was spreading the sludge. So I called the company that was spreading the sludge, asked the same questions. They quickly grew frustrated with my questions, couldn't really answer any questions. And the questions they did answer led to more questions in my mind. They said that this stuff was okayed from a person with a doctor. They said a doctor from Auburn University. So I asked for this letter. They never sent it. I eventually got my hands on this letter, and it did state that there was some fertilizing capabilities in this NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but they didn't address any of the chemical or biological risk in this fertilizer. So just keep that in mind as I keep telling the story. So I kept asking questions. Nothing made sense. Lots of red flags, especially by them telling them that this was good for their soil. It was, natural. It was organic. It was food grade, which USDA does not give, or FDA does not give an a food grade status to fertilizers. So I knew that was a lie and a misrepresentation of what they were putting out on farmers' land. So I started asking questions about how this is regulated. I was like, this has to be regulated somehow. This can't be legal, what they're putting out. So I started asking ADEM questions, and keep in mind this is the summer of 2019. So I finally found out, after multiple questions, talking to multiple people, I finally found out in 2019 there were absolutely no regulations for the application of poultry wastewater sludge to land. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe that there was no regulations. The only regulation they couldn't break is the Clean Water Act. So, and that goes for anything that you put out. As far as the Clean Water Act is concerned, you can't contaminate water sources. So, or not supposed to, I guess I should say. So I kept looking for I was like, there has to be something. So I found out that that there was this loophole in law, and they called this sludge and other sludges, quote unquote, beneficial use byproducts. And beneficial use byproducts is a term coined by industry to find other uses for their waste streams other than landfilling. And examples of beneficial use byproducts can be this poultry processing wastewater sludge, be paper mill sludge, flue ash. Alabama Power wants to use its flue ash as a beneficial use byproduct on agricultural land. And there's also this other category, municipality wastewater sludge, which is also known as biosolids. And there's two classes of biosolids, Class A and Class B. But when you're talking about biosolids, there are federal regulations on biosolids. They're called the EPA 503s. And those do fall under a Class A or Class B, and EPA does have regulations on biosolids. And those are specifically, biosolids are specifically sludges that come from municipalities' wastewater sludge, wastewater treatment, I'm sorry. So keeping that in mind, there are regulations for that. And I found out that these companies, there's several in Alabama. There's Denali Water Solutions. There's Synagro. There's another company that just cropped up called Cherokee Environmental Resources, LLC. A lot of these companies, and the three that I mentioned, handle both industrial wastewater sludge and biosolids. So they handle both of these products. So when they told me in 2019 that it was poultry wastewater sludge, I asked ADEM, I said, how do you know that it's coming from a poultry plant? Because these companies also handle biosolids. How do you know which product this is? But ADEM doesn't test. And to this day, ADEM doesn't test the sludge to see if it's from a municipality or if it's from an industry. So there's a big loophole in the law there that they were potentially using, that they could, apply basically a mixture. They could apply one product, or they could apply the other product, biosolids, or they could apply industrial wastewater sludge. So it was very interesting finding this out. I had no clue that this was going on. And of course, from my work in food and feed safety, I felt like this was a huge issue. And keep in mind, I was working for a large industrial plant company at the time, and my work was in food and feed safety. And my job was to write programs to protect food and feed safety. So when I found this out and I started investigating, and I found out that this was not just happening in Alabama, this is happening in Georgia. To this day, this is happening in Georgia, Oklahoma, New York, Ohio, Michigan, Maine. Maine actually just banned it in 2022, I believe. They banned the use of biosolids. Now, industrial sludge, I don't know where they stand on other industrial sludges, but they don't allow biosolid application in Maine anymore. But this is happening in Georgia. So this is happening across the United States on agricultural fields. So this was a huge food safety and quality issue. And the reason it is, they're putting this stuff on agricultural fields. So what's the risk? You may be, well, okay, what's the issue, right? Because used to they used human food or manure on crops before in the past. Well, yeah, they did back then, but we also didn't take pharmaceuticals. We also didn't have industry input, hospital waste, mortuary waste. We didn't have all of these waste streams going into these municipalities. And this sludge is they're cleaning the water. And when they clean the water to discharge it, and I use the word clean loosely, but they're cleaning the water to be able to discharge it back into a water stream or discharge it back into the environment. They have to clean that water before the municipality discharges it. So when they clean that water, this is the stuff that they're getting out of that water. So when I'm talking about biosolids. So just think about the contamination that's in these sludges. And they're putting this on ag land. Our crops are uptaking some of these chemicals, and then we're eating those crops. So if you're on this call today and you're wondering, how in the world does this impact me? If you eat, if you drink, this impacts you. If you eat dinner tonight, think about where your potatoes are grown. How are they grown? So this impacts every consumer. And my hope tonight for this call is that some of you that are listening, that will help, because Cindy said I'm an expert in it. Well, I think sometimes people get a term expert because they know a little bit more than other people know. So that's kind of where I feel I am. But tonight, you all learn a little bit about this, dive into it, read more about it, or just simply reach out to your legislatures. I've had very little to no success for people paying attention to what I'm saying as far as our politicians are concerned. In fact, and I'll show you, if we could show slide 2 real quick, why I have got very little attention on this topic. So in front of you, you'll see a letter that was penned by Jimmy Parnell, which is the president of Alpha. And this was written in August of 2019. So let me go back just a little bit. And I'm sorry if I'm scattered here, but I'm not a professional speaker. So this is kind of new here, or I'm new to this kind of. But,
is that the right slide?
Yes, this is the right slide. Okay. So if you look at it here, it's to Alabama Department of Environmental Management in 2019. So back in 2019, there was no regulation except they couldn't violate the Clean Water Act for the land application of these solid waste, these sludges. If it didn't go to land use, like for fertilizer, it would be considered a solid waste. So that's how ADEM would classify this stuff. So in August, they were receiving public comments. So this was applied to land near me in June. In August, ADEM was considering regulations because they were getting complaints about this stuff. And it was time for them to write some sort of regulation against this. So it just kind of coincidentally happened next to me, and then they were writing regulations in August. So it's very odd timing, or I should say great timing, that they were writing these regulations. But Alpha wrote in, and this is the letter that Alpha wrote in, and it says, on behalf of the 340,000 member families of the Alabama Farmers Federation, the state's largest farm organization, we offer comments regarding proposed Rule 335.13.6, which is the beneficial use byproducts regs. This is the meat of it. Solid waste has become an increasingly important fertilizer resource for Alabama farmers and landowners. And the application of this product on farmland provides an environmentally responsible outlet for waste disposal. So Alpha supports the use of solid waste as fertilizer on our agricultural fields. And Alpha lobbies against any regulation that would protect communities like mine, rural communities like yours, or rural communities that provide you with food. They promote this and they support this. And I've had calls with Alpha trying to get them to listen to me. I have sent them information and articles about farms that have been shut down because of biosolid use and sludge use, communities that have been impacted by poultry wastewater sludges with their well waters being contaminated with nitrate, but yet they still support this, and I have yet to hear them speak against this. So there's a reason that politicians are not eager to listen to me, because of Alpha's lobbying power. On the next picture over, you'll see a picture, and this was taken from Alabama Cattlemen's Association this year in February. They had a meeting. It was their big meeting that they have every year. And I cut the man's face out of respect for his privacy, but look on his shirt. He was a speaker for Denali Water Solutions, a sludge company. So he came and spoke to Alabama's most influential cattle farmers about sludge. And Denali was also a sponsor of this meeting. So this is all very concerning. And I have been working hard, very hard, to try to get the word out about why this is a danger to our rural areas, our food, our water. And I've had some success, but my hope for this call is that, like I said earlier, that you guys will see how big of an issue this is and reach out to your legislatures. Perhaps we could get together and write a bill. We've got to protect Alabama farmers. They're not being told the truth. They're only told about the fertilizing capabilities. They're told greenwashing terms like this is organic, this is natural, and this is the farthest thing from the truth. And they need to be told the other side of the story. And we've got to protect our farmland, because you all know our farmland is disappearing every day, and our small farmer is disappearing. And it's because of these types of companies that are causing them to get their farm seized, have their land contaminated, and shady practices that are driving them out of business. So we've got to stick together and stand up and spread the word about these sludges. Here. So I mentioned in 2019 there was no regulation in June of 2019 when they applied the sludge. So I went to several ADM meetings and spoke, and that's how I met Martha Hunter with Alabama Rivers Alliance, and she heard me speak. Well, actually, it was funny because I sat down at the ADM meeting and I looked over and I saw some gals and guys and gals, and they looked like they were environmental folks. You know, they had on the khaki shirt, khaki pants and the shirts and the hats, and they looked like. And then I heard them talking about REI opening up in Huntsville, and I was like, hey, these are environmental folks. And I was there with my husband, and I kind of slid over and introduced myself to Martha and the group, Nelson with Black Warrior, Riverkeeper, and they heard me speak, and Martha got with me after the meeting, and it was just miraculous that I met Martha, because from that she really helped spread, get me, what's the word here that I'm looking for? She really inspired me to keep working on this, because I felt as an individual, as a citizen, that I was alone. Because ADM, I took a vacation day and came and spoke to ADM, and they only give you 3 minutes to speak unless you send your information to them prior, and they okay it. And I think it's 10 minutes that they'll allow you to speak, but they have to review your documentation before. So they kind of cut me off. I kept going past the 3 minutes, and they kind of cut me off and told me I should have prepared better for that speech, and maybe I should have. But it was hard to get my point across in 3 minutes. So Martha really helped inspire me to keep going, and that there was a group that took interest, in Alabama Rivers Alliance took interest, so much interest that they did a documentary through their Southern Exposure document series, and they did a documentary called Soiled, and where me and several other community members were in there talking about this issue and why this is so important to our state. So I will be forever grateful for Alabama Rivers Alliance. And also, our state groups, our river, like Alabama Rivers Alliance, but also our river keepers have played an important role in this too. They've all went down and supported whenever they were reviewing the regulations back in 2019 and the years following. They have went down and wrote in comments. So some off the top of my head is Coosa River Keeper, and also Black Warrior River Keeper has been super helpful. Southern Environmental Law Center has been helpful as well. And also from a national level, the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project has been helpful. They help fight against injustices to rural communities by industrial agriculture. And so they are a really important group. Sierra Club has a working group on biosolids where they're trying to they gather information and data and try to figure out what we can do to help bring awareness and try to stop this, and try to petition EPA to write stronger regulations and protect our farmland from these types of application. So I just kind of wanted to give a nod to all of those groups. And as you know, they all need your support because they are fighting some very important fights. And without them, I would have given up. So I really appreciate their work. There's so much I could say. We could go into all the complaints across our state. This isn't just my community. This is, last week I got a call from a gentleman down in Asheville that they're putting sludge, Denali Centergrove. Centergrove's putting out sludge from Tyson and Albertville next to their community, and they want to know how to fight this. And it's Blount County, Morgan County, of course, Marshall County, Coleman County, Colbert County. There's all these counties Etowah County that are getting sludged on, and they don't have anybody to help them. And because they're in rural communities, there's not a lot of people that will rally around them and say, hey, this is not okay. We don't need to do this. And also other states, if they're starting to become wise and saying, like Maine, and they're saying we don't want to let no more land application of biosolids, their biosolids have to go somewhere. And if Alabama has this open door for sludge, where do you think it's going to go? It's going to come to the states that don't have regulations. And so we've got to get together, and I can talk to y'all about, the trains in New York that were coming down to West Jefferson. I think it was West Jefferson County. And they were sitting on the rail tracks, and people started complaining about the odor. Well, that was sludge from New York coming down to Alabama. So, this is a major business. This is a lot of money we're talking about here. And that's another reason maybe politicians don't want to talk about this or try to find a good solution for this. Because out of sight, out of mind, it's not impacting them. So why do they need to do anything about it? So but there's so much that I could talk about here, and it's hard to share how much this has impacted my family. And like Cindy said, or I had said earlier, I felt like this was a huge food safety issue where I worked. So I had contacted two upper folks that were in food and feed safety that I knew in Cargill. And I also attached my boss to that particular email where I had contacted them. I gave them a month to respond on how we can tackle this issue, because if my company that I worked for would say no to biosolids, this would put a huge dent in the land application of biosolids. But they didn't say anything. I gave them a month to respond to me, and they never said anything. So here I was writing policies about no tobacco use in our plant. But yet our product could be grown, our beans could be, soybeans could be grown in sewage sludge and other industrial waste, and that's okay. And I knew that I couldn't work there anymore, that I couldn't support my role anymore. And so I resigned from my position in 2019. And ever since, I have been working to bring awareness. I came home and I started growing. I mean, we've always had a garden, but I started upping my garden because I knew I wanted to have control of where our food was grown. And, you know, this really changed a lot of how we lived because, you know, our food is our fuel and our water is our life. And without those things, we're in a pickle if we don't have those things, no pun intended. But yeah, you know, it's just, this is an awful situation, and I see the future of agriculture is going to be in a bad shape if this continues. There's been a farm recently in Michigan that was seized because they had used biosolids from a municipality that was contaminated with PFAS. So if you're not familiar with PFAS, 3M and DuPont had created these PFAS, PFOAs, PFOSs products, and they're said to be in every human's blood at this point. So if it's in every human's blood, it's ending up in our sludges that are being land applied, and that's what's happened. That's happened in Michigan. It's also happened across our nation, and it actually even happened here in Alabama, in Decatur. Decatur Utilities they received wastewater in from 3M, and 3M had contaminated their wastewater with PFOAs and PFOSs for years, and they were land applying the sludge. And so those sludges were land applied here in Alabama. The farms, you know, who knows how much contamination those farms have. The cattle that was grazed on those, the deer, the turkey that grazed over these properties, they're supposed to put up signs on their fields to not allow human contact for a period of time after they apply biosolids. But deer and turkey and geese, they don't follow, they can't read signs. So this is all very concerning. But I would like to kind of open up the floor if y'all have any questions, if I have any gaps, because I'm not, like I said, I'm not a professional speaker. I'm kind of new to all this. So I'm not very well organized, and I know I can be all over the place. So maybe if we had some questions come in, I can help answer any or fill in any gaps that I didn't cover.
So, Julie, before we get into questions, can you just tell folks like how they can learn more? I mean, I think somebody, Kate, posted in the chat a link to the Alabama Waste Sludge Awareness Facebook page, and just maybe how folks could get more aware of the issue, more get in contact with the efforts to try and deal with the issue.
So Alabama Waste Sludge Awareness Facebook page is a good way. There's also a group called Mission 503, and they're a national group. They're trying to get off the ground. So go check out their website as well. There's several documentaries that you can watch. The soiled one I mentioned before. There's another one called Biosludged. That's a good one, and I didn't send a link to it beforehand, but you can look it up on YouTube and watch it for free. It's a really good one. It's got an interview with the EPA top scientist named Dr. David Lewis, and he was a whistleblower on the 503 regulations, and he was eventually fired because of his whistleblowing activity. So you can check that out as well.
So there's a question in the chat about how can we reach out to farmers. So I know that's been one of the things that we've talked about over the years that we've been engaged with you is, you know, there's the regulatory side where we need stronger regulations and we need new laws, but there's also just educating farmers that we know about this so that they're asking questions if they get approached with this. Do you have advice for folks on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way. So like if you're going, well, let me start over. So like I just called Alpha and started talking to them. I talked to their lawyer, I talked to their lobbyist. Of course I didn't get anywhere, but who knows? Maybe I did plant a seed and something resonated with them. And maybe one day they'll realize what's going on and they'll fight against this. But I'm not holding my breath on that. Alpha, I called Alpha and talked to Alpha, their director, their president. I can't remember her title, but she was high up in Alabama Farmers Association. I'm sorry, the Alabama Cattlemen's Association. And we had a really good discussion. Again, I don't know if this discussion did anything good or not, but just, reaching out. And if you know local farmers, just go and talk to them and warn them and just say, hey, have you gotten approached by these companies offering sludge, like wastewater sludge on your property? And they might say no, they might say yes, they might go kick a can, but at least you tried to have a conversation with them. So I would suggest that any of you have a conversation. If you have, a local farmers market, talk to them. Go have that conversation, and then of course support your local farmers. So while you're there at the farmers market, just talk to them and be like, hey, I'm looking for a farmer that doesn't use this industrial wastewater sludge and municipality wastewater sludge on their property. And they might look at you funny and be like, oh, do you know about that? And then that would be an opportunity to talk to them about it too. And anytime I can, talk about this, I do. And so even to, us as consumers, even if you're not a farmer, us as consumers can start asking those questions, and those farmers will be like, hey, we've got a consumer group that doesn't want this. So like, and just letting you know too, USDA Organic does not allow sludge to be used on their products. So that's another thing that you need to keep in your hat, that they don't allow this. So if you're going to the grocery store, if you have to buy from the grocery store, support USDA Organic. And there's a lot of problems with USDA Organic, but this is one thing that they do have right, not using these sludges as fertilizers.
That's very helpful. I think about how a lot of us have heard of Catherine Coleman Flowers and the way that she was just a drumbeat for sanitation equity in the Black Belt for so many years, and then was able to get her voice lifted in her position and into places of power, like she's now on the White House Environmental Justice Council. So I think your voice, and you keep sharing your information and your voice in so many ways in so many places. And I hope that drumbeat can eventually get, loud enough that our elected officials do start paying attention more to this issue. And that's what we need. You need our help with. You need everyone on this call to help with that drumbeat and that raising that voice and raising that awareness. And that's with farmers, and that's with politicians, and that's with agencies and everyone else that we can talk to about it. And consumers is also, as you mentioned. So.
Yes.
I do believe that it's not all for naught. It's gonna get there. It's just everything takes so much time.
Yes.
Really. So now, speaking of elected officials, Kathy mentioned in the chat that there were some bills last year with biosolids. I don't know if I recall that. Julie, did we talk about that and I forgot about it?
There was a bill in Talladega County that they didn't want to allow sludge to be, or biosolids to be land applied in Talladega County. And that passed. They allowed it, it went through. But the guy that was spreading biosolids started spreading waste from a dog food plant, the sludge from a dog food plant, which is not considered biosolids. So their wording of their bill allowed for a loophole for other industrial sludges to get through. So when you write these bills, you've got to be all inclusive, because if they can find a loophole, they'll find it. And there also was Jackson County. Tommy Haynes was a representative for Jackson County. He is no longer a representative. He got not voted out, but he's no longer the representative. He lost the election for Jackson County, and he had presented bills for several years trying to get Jackson County to have the right to vote. They wanted to allow the citizens of Jackson County to vote if they wanted biosolids to be allowed to be spread in Jackson County. Well, Alpha, now this is from Tommy, he said Alpha lobbied and fought against him and did not want this to pass, and it never did get through. So I'm very disappointed in Alpha. I can't even express it. I went to school at Auburn, and Auburn was, Alpha was in everything. Little I Rodeo, they sponsored our graduation breakfast, and it was just, I believe they were a sponsor for our graduation. They were there for sure. I remember seeing a table for Alpha. And, they were involved. What I'm trying to say is they were heavily involved in the College of Agriculture at Auburn. And I just thought Alpha was great. They're standing up for the farmer. But then I found this out, and I can't believe it. I can't believe that they would do this and support this type of practice.
And I think that's what we see a lot with our, unfortunately, with politics, is we, get money and profits and industries pitted against health and environment and people. And oftentimes some of the entities that we think should be protecting us and supporting us are not. And
right.
That's very disheartening for people. And it's frustrating for us, their advocacy. I know the league is very involved in advocacy and very involved in the legislative session and things like that. And so one of the things, I'll just put a seed out there of one of the things that the league does in just determining what issues they support or get involved in is league members and league chapters can do can initiate a study on a particular issue to determine a position on it. It takes a little time. They're very careful about what they support and don't support, or what we support and don't support as a league, but it's good that they vet the issues and really study them before they decide a position. And if anyone's interested in taking this up as a league chapter, as a league member, and studying it for future support from the league, I think that would be an interesting topic to take up.
Yeah. And I just saw in the comments, Sandy, Kathy had put that the local water treatment plant sold dried waste for fertilizer. So one thing I didn't tell you about is that a lot of these bagged compost, bagged soil amendments, fertilizers, even potting soil will have biosolids in it, and they are not required to list biosolids as an ingredient. So keep that in mind when you guys are going and buying your potting soil or your compost fertilizer for your home gardens, that you may be putting something on your land or your gardens that you don't want to, and that's a shame. That's absolutely a shame. People start growing their food to avoid contamination, and they're growing their vegetables in it, not knowing.
Julie, I just you just made me think, because what I was talking about was actually bags of dried poop that we used to go down the road on. If anybody's from Bluff Park in Birmingham, we'd drive down the road on Chapel Road and pick it up and bring it home and put it on our vegetable garden. And we get a lot of volunteer tomato plants.
Yes.
But also what you just said, we did go to Lowe's a few years ago I was going to build a raised bed garden, and I bought a ton of bags of stuff. And when I looked at the ingredients, there was nothing organic in it. It was all basically waste material.
Yeah.
And I was really disappointed. And we never did grow anything in that garden.
Yeah. That seems pretty common. A lot of people lately have been, speaking up about that their soils, their seeds didn't germinate properly. They didn't, and the odor coming from it and things along those lines. But yeah, a lot of these bag products.
It wasn't even animal product. It was not even an animal product. It was waste materials.
Right. Yep. It's awful.
Hey, Julie. Hey, Julie, this is Martha. With your poultry background, I'm wondering if you could say a little more about what's so bad about the waste sludge that comes from poultry plants in particular.
Yeah, sure. So in a poultry facility, you might think, well, this sludge might not be so bad. Well, in poultry facilities, they usually have one whole shift that's dedicated to sanitation. And that sanitation shift, they take apart the equipment and they have multiple chemicals, a multitude, I should say, of chemicals that they use to spray the equipment down to kill any kind of bacteria like E. coli, salmonella, listeria, to kill those so that it doesn't cross-contaminate their products on down the line. And then, of course, and during their processing, they use massive amounts of chlorine. They'll use a bird pre-rinse or post-rinse. There's the foot wash material. There's multitude of chemicals that are used in a poultry facility. And each poultry facility may use different chemicals. So Tyson will use this set of chemicals. Pilgrims will use this set of chemicals. They might use some of the same, and then they'll use some that are different. So all of that wastewater, along with the processing wastewater, goes to their pretreatment, their wastewater pretreatment step before they can discharge to the city. So all of those chemicals and things along those lines, most of them are, the whole purpose of them, or a lot of the chemicals that they use are degreasers because chicken has fat in it, right? So they want to degrease the equipment as well. So all of these chemicals go out into these wastewaters, and then some of them will adhere to the fats and be in these sludges, these DAF, dissolved air flotation sludges. And so that's something that you need to consider. And one of the sludge guys, when I was talking to him on that initial call, he said, well, it's food grade. And I'm like, no, no, it's not food grade. Just because the chemicals that you use might be food grade doesn't mean that the sludge is food grade. And it's totally, I don't even have a word for him, but just ignorant. So the sludges, they're taking those and they're going and putting these on people's property. And there's been studies done that, the fat content in these sludges can actually prohibit the water uptake from the crops. And then some of these chemicals can be taken up by the crops. And then, of course, we eat those crops, or the cattle eat them, the deer, the turkey, and that's a whole nother thing too, is a lot of times in these sludges, there's going to be fecal material in these sludges from the birds. Well, if they're putting this stuff out onto fields, our turkey populations, our geese population, like all of those are grazing over these fields as well. And how is that impacting our turkey populations? How is this impacting our geese and our cattle? So these chemicals can be very dangerous and actually prohibitive to our crops. And a lot of people say, well, I see the grass growing, and there is, I'm not going to deny, there is some fertilizing capabilities in these sludges, but there's also the other side of it that they're not telling farmers about. And that's where the disingenuous attitude or conversations are happening, and they need to know that other side. I kind of equate it to a bodybuilder. So some of these sludges are a high percent of water. So, it's like on a bodybuilder, you see them taking, like they might take a testosterone or all these different hormones, right, or steroids, and they're taking these and they look great on the outside, but what's happening to the inside of them? And that's kind of the same thing with these sludges. What's actually going on and happening to our crops, cattle, and so on.
All right. I see Nancy Muse has your hand raised.
First of all, I'm so glad for everybody being here tonight, and especially to Julie. And I reiterate what Cindy said. The courage that you have, Julie, is admirable and inspirational to the rest of us who think about things but that's as far as it goes, and you're actually out there doing something. So I just had to say that, and I want to thank Doris Solarius for being here from Oregon tonight with the Sierra Club, and she put a link in the chat. I hope if any of you are interested, my understanding is that Sierra Club teams can be, people that aren't even members of Sierra Club, out of interest, may join some of the teams. So Doris, can, if you want to get in touch with her, Doris, if you could put, your contact info, that might be nice. Julie, I know that PFAS and PFOS have been mentioned tonight, but for some here that may not be, even for us who talk about it, there's so much to know. Could you go over a little bit about the thousands or hundreds of thousands of forever chemicals, and what, how that could impact a farm if somebody has that spread on their farm? What could happen to the future of that farm? Things like that, if you don't mind just elaborating a wee bit more. Thank you.
Well, I'm not an expert on PFOAs and PFOSs, but I do know that they're not good for us, right? Like we know that they cause cancers, they cause a series of other health issues in humans. We also know that they're persistent in the environment. They don't go away. There's some ways to filter these PFOAs and PFOSs out through like reverse osmosis of water and things along those lines. And right now, there is no regulation on sludges being they don't have to be, let me start over. Sludges don't have to be tested for PFOAs and PFOSs, even though they know they're in there. So we're all just sitting around waiting to see what EPA does. So EPA still hasn't issued drinking water requirements. Now they've given out a advisory level for PFOAs and PFOSs in drinking water. So you can imagine how far away we are from sludge getting regulated, because they still haven't done drinking water. And they found that throughout our nation, there's, I don't even know how many, Cindy might have a better idea, but the majority of our drinking water is contaminated with PFOAs and PFOSs. I think that's a fair statement, don't you think, Cindy?
Yes, I don't know the exact number, but it's definitely a lot of them, most of them. And most of them in Alabama are drinking water are going to be, once the new regulations come out, they're going to be above the limit. And they're all scrambling now to look at how do they upgrade their treatment systems to meet this need. And one of the challenges is that it's going to cost a lot of money for these utilities to get the kind of treatment that it's going to take to get this out of our drinking water. And so the other end of that regulation is industry, right? Industry needs to be regulating it, not putting it into our waterways. And thankfully 3M has said that they're not going to create the one or discharge and use the ones that they've been using, but then what they usually do is go change the formula and put out some more. But but then back to the sludge issue, if they're, the requirements are that they can't put it into the water, then they're going to have to get rid of it elsewhere, and that may mean more in the sludge. So it definitely needs to be parallel. I think the good thing about regulating the sludge is it shouldn't take as long as Safe Drinking Water Act. The way that it was created to get new contaminants on the Safe Drinking Water Act is a long process. It takes forever. So that's why this has taken so long from the drinking water side. But it shouldn't take that long if we were able to get the advocacy we needed to get regulations of the sludge, because they don't have those same Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. So it still probably would politically, but just from an actual requirement standpoint, it doesn't take as much rigorous steps.
And there's a couple of documentaries out there that I would suggest folks watch, that if you're not familiar with these terms that we're using. The first one is The Devil We Know. It is a documentary about a community that was contaminated with these PFOAs, PFOSs from a DuPont plant, and I believe it was in West Virginia. And then there was a Hollywood production of the same story called Dark Waters, and that would be a good one to watch as well. And Nancy, you asked about the impact on our farms. this could be a very sad reality for our future of our farms. So like the farm in Maine that was, or not Maine, but Michigan that was seized, this particular farmer had inherited a generational old dairy farm. He was I forgot how, fourth generation farmer, I believe, to own this farm in his family. And at some point they had spread biosolids on this farm. And he was contacted to test his soil, and he did. And they came back and said that that farm can no longer produce any beef because it was a beef farm. No more beef, and he cannot grow crops on his farm. And so he is essentially out of business. And he had been producing beef for his community. And so people had freezers of beef. And there's a documentary about that was just done recently. I'll try to find a link for that and try to post it before the call's over. But guys, it's sad. If they're going to start seizing farms that tip this biosolids, we're going to be in it. It's going to be bad. The future of farming is going to be bleak. And keep in mind too that these farms that do use this, let's say you have a farm that does use biosolids and the farm next to it doesn't use biosolids, but they use the irrigation water from the local creek, it's going to get on their farm too. And if they're using that irrigation water from a same water reservoir and they're downstream from said farm. So there's ways that this is going to contaminate them as well. So the implications could go far and deep. And we need our agricultural farms, or our farms. I don't know why I said agricultural farms, sorry. But we need our farms, and it's a very sad, bleak future if this is what's going on and continues to go on.
Thank you for that bad news.
Yeah. So I kind of use the example too. So I had a guy tell me recently that he was told that if he didn't start using this stuff, that he was eventually going to be priced out of business because the cost of fertilizer was at such that if he didn't use this, he would be at a disadvantage for other farmers. So they're using that scare tactic to talk to farmers into using this stuff. Well, so-and-so's using it and so-and-so's using it. Why are you not using it? And you're going to be put at a disadvantage if you don't use this.
Sorry, I was chatting in the chat, but thank you.
That's okay.
Answering some questions.
And it's true. So let's say, I don't even know what the cost of fertilizer is right now, but let's just say it was $80 for liquid nitrogen per acre. Okay. And this guy, then you got farmer A that's going to use liquid nitrogen on his farm. And then you've got farmer B that's going to use this stuff, the sludge, right? And they put this stuff out so much, thousands of gallons per acre. Just keep that in mind. So if you have farmer A that's paying nitrogen costs at $80 an acre, whatever it is now, I'm sure it's way higher than $80 an acre now. And then you have farmer B that's not having to spend that per acre. That's putting farmer A at an economic disadvantage over farmer B. So if more land comes up for sale to crop, who's going to be able to afford that land? And then whose practices are going to continue at a wider pace? Farmer B, right? So there's so many implications that are, it's pitting farmers against farmers. It's pitting communities against communities. There's so many. This is just a horrible practice all around.
So one of the things that somebody mentioned is PFAS, like something that's been around for a long time, or is it recent? It's been around for a long time. They actually, the first like long chain ones which is just the molecules or whatever long chain, were identified in the 70s, 80s, and they were banned. And so the companies created new formulas of these chemicals, and they are called short chain, but it turns out they're still just as persistent in the environment. They're in everything from, our waterproof clothes. I mean, my running clothes probably have them in them. Our rain gear, our fast food wrappers, pizza boxes, cosmetics. I mean, they are in so many. It's basically what creates. It's not, the main one we all know of is nonstick cookware, and like Post-it notes. It's what creates
Dental
products
floss.
that don't stick. And so it's pretty pervasive stuff, and it's also in firefighting foam, yes, which is one of those that's going to be really hard to get rid of because they need to be able to fight fires, and we're seeing more and more of those fires. So there's definitely a good movement to try to get rid of these forever chemicals. But I think, again, the idea, oftentimes we get rid of something out of one area and it creates it in another area, like the waste sludge does. So, figuring out how to make these products that we need and use that don't include that is what's really the key. And making sure we don't just transfer the waste from our water to our land is definitely another key area. One thing I will say that I think, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the regulations that ADEM did pass, we argued for them to, or we all commented they did not go with this, but for them to be more transparent in what's in this stuff, and for them to label it and let farmers know. And if I remember correctly, they did not put anything in the regulations that do require that, at least the disclosure, let alone the monitoring or the getting rid of it. And that's something I think that's probably the next step, or a step that we could take with legislators or somebody once we raise this awareness, is at least the transparency, so that you can see what's in the biosludge, what's in the waste sludge that there's being peddled to farmers, or that you're buying at the store, as you mentioned with fertilizers. And the transparency issue is becoming more and more of a one that might be doable, might be more bipartisan than other issues in the legislature. Nancy has her hand up again, but I'll let you respond to that, Julie.
Yeah, real quick. So you mentioned that these PFOAs and PFOSs, some of them have been around since the 70s, 80s, still today, right? Because it's my understanding 3M is still making them. They just said in the year, was it 2024, they're going to stop. Is that right?
Yep.
So they're still making them, still putting them out. And keep in mind that we're just now doing something about it in our drinking water, just now. So 70s, 80s, 90s, the early 2000s, 10s, here we are in the 20s, okay? So every day I saw something, every year there's 1,500 new chemicals are introduced into commerce every year. So keep that in mind. These chemicals are being introduced, okayed, and put into commerce, and we're just playing catch up in the United States. And that's a dangerous place to be, especially with these sludges, because the industry knows what they're putting out, but does the EPA know? And how do we know what's happening to these sludges when they're put into our sewer treatment plants and then onto farmland? Very scary situation.
And as we get into these spending fights that our government has often, the money is never being spent on science or at least not enough on science and research of these types of things. And EPA's budgets are continually cut, or their priorities are put in other places. But just knowing what's out there that we're being faced with is a pretty huge. But we don't want to leave you hopeless. But I'm going to let Nancy, your hand's raised, so I'm going to let you make a comment.
So, not to be a rebel rouser, but there can't be enough said. Martha's laughing. There can't be enough said for making a noise. And here we are, 22 of us. There were 23 tonight. If all of us pick up a phone and call ADEM and express our concern, not just one time, but maybe once a month or more, get our friends to call in and say what's going on with this. Because, on a national level, if they're not adequate regulations, they can always fall back on that. But we still need to put pressure on them to at least be transparent. I know that I tried to get some answers, and I hit a dead end or a brick wall, a concrete block wall. And so I just think that we have to make a noise because we're here. Here we all are because we care. And for each one of us here, there are probably 500 or 600 or 1,000 people who don't even have a clue that this subject even exists. So, I mean, I just say, let's get out here and talk about this and make phone calls. And even if people don't want to hear us, we still have to make a noise about it. And the more we can say in public, because that's what, the folks that are okay with all of this certainly don't like having this exposed in the public eye. And Julie, you, and I think you had some colleagues, I'm not sure who all, but your Facebook, Alabama Waste Sludge Awareness, is a huge step. And we just need to follow Julie's lead and support Julie and her efforts and get behind her and then go out and do this thing. I mean, we've just got to do it. Sorry.
No, that was the great, positive note we needed to move to from the sort of spiral we were getting into. So, and it's not easy. I mean, it's easy to go into the spiral, but that's absolutely right, Nancy. So we thank you for that way. And I don't know exactly what our timing is. If we can ask if anyone has any more questions, or if we want to wrap it up. I know Kathy has some announcements before we go. And Julie, I don't know if you have any closing remarks you want to. Martha, will you post the Facebook page in the chat again? Someone's asking for it. Or Kate, whoever posted it originally. Thank you all for keeping up with the links in the chat.
Yeah, so I guess what you said, Cindy, this is it's overwhelming. Most people don't even know that this is happening. I mean, I didn't even know it was happening, and I worked for the industry that was providing some of these sludges. So, it's awareness is the first thing. And then, start buying, like I said, start buying your food from your local farmers market. Ask them questions. Get to know your farmers. It's super important to get to know your farmers. And make sure that they know that you do not want this on your property. And they may have not even heard about it. The majority of farmers that I talk to have never even heard about this before, and they look at you like you're crazy. They're like, what? No, I would never put this on my property. So, but it's good to have that conversation, because I'm sure one day they will be approached and asked to have this. So, just buy from your local folks, have these conversations. It's not a nice conversation to have, and but it's a worthy one. We've got to get the word out about this, and I appreciate everybody taking your time on this Tuesday afternoon to come talk about something that is not pleasant. And but once you know, and you can't just sit on it. That's how I was. Once I knew what was going on, and they stopped spreading in my valley. Now they're spreading on the other side of my valley. But I keep meeting people that are having sludge put next to them, and I don't want it. I don't just not want it in my backyard. I don't want it in anybody's backyard. I don't want it on y'all's food. It shouldn't be. Our food should not be grown in this stuff. I don't want anybody to eat this stuff. And so that's why I continue fighting and trying to bring awareness to this, because I do see this as a huge food safety risk. But the good news is there are a lot of people that are moving towards sustainable agriculture. There's a huge movement of people that are wanting to grow their own food, and that is beautiful to see that. And so we just have to protect the land that we do have. And ADEM, there's some really good folks working at ADEM, and then there's some folks that are a little shady. So I just know that, and I feel like that there are people that are listening that work in ADEM, and they've listened to me. Some of the things I suggested they've listened to. So hopefully they'll listen to you guys too. And especially if there's enough of us that keeps talking about this and keeps prodding them to write stronger regulations. That's what we need, is stronger regulations, and follow the lead of Maine that has banned the use of these sludges on ag fields. That's got to stop. That's the first step, right? Stop the bleed. And then we'll continue going on and find ways that we can safely handle these biosolids so that they're not a risk to environmental health and human health.
Thank you. And yes, I really want to, as I said earlier, appreciate Julie and your activism so much, and the fact that you do care about everyone's backyard, not just your own backyard. And there is one more question before we close, and it was if you could say the names of some of the companies that are providing this stuff, that are selling this stuff to farmers, or are giving it to farmers or whatever, so that we know who we're talking about and who we need to work against or work to educate.
Denali Water Solutions is one. Synagro is another. And Cherokee Environmental Resources, LLC, is another. There's all these other little podunk name sludge companies that are floating around too. And sometimes they'll have their truck name, they'll have their company name on the sides of the truck. Sometimes they won't. So those are the three big ones that I'm seeing a lot of complaints come through ADAM's database, is those three that I just mentioned. And keep in mind that, it's got Synagro, AGR, so it's a nod to agriculture and growing. Denali Water Solutions, like this is the solution for our water. And then Cherokee Environmental Resources. It all sounds lovely. It sounds beautiful. And the name, the name of the company that spread next to me was Recycle Systems Southeast LLC. So recycle, like recycling. And they're recycling these contaminants back onto our plates of food. So that company actually got bought out by Denali. And then the guy that worked for Recycle started Cherokee Environmental. So they're all kind of in cahoots with each other. So they're connected in one way or the other. It seems like they all know each other.
Yeah, so I assume you can search on e-file for the complaints, and you can file complaints if you are, even if you're just riding through the country and you don't live there and you smell some rank stuff, let ADAM know, because it's probably, most of us know what cow manure and chicken litter smell like. If it doesn't smell like that, it's probably the bad stuff.
Yeah, I'd say that's a safe assumption. If you ever smelled a backed up sewer, that's what it smells like, but you just feel like you're in a vacuum of it.
Okay, so Kathy, do you want to? Thank you so much, Julie. We're also grateful for you, and we're grateful for you being here tonight. And I'll turn it back over to Kathy for some announcements before we close down.
Thank you. And just one moment, I wanted to first of all say this has been very eye-opening. Julie, thank you. This has been very sobering, and it's also, once again, it shows you that knowledge is power, because what we know now we can go use. The reason we keep doing these educational forums, including the environment, is so that we'll all understand exactly where the issues are, and how we can go out and hold our elected leaders accountable. And this is just one more example of what would benefit from a healthy dose of sunlight and government accountability. And when you go out and you pick the people that you want to vote for, then you need to be talking to them about these kind of issues and what their positions are, because that's the only way we're going to really change things, is at the ballot box. And then also, like Cindy and Nancy and others have been saying, is to call and talk to ADAM, talk to anybody that'll listen about this subject. There's so many other things that we've heard and learned about, that there's just a lot of problems. We need elected leaders who are going to support making our environment clean and safe for all of us. I wanted to share some more information about our upcoming educational forums. We have first of all, I'm going to show you. I want to make sure I've got it up before I pull it up. Hold on. I wanted to show you where we're going to put the forum from tonight. I'm going to pull it up before I share my screen, so I won't make you dizzy. I switch between stuff so fast. All right. And I wanted to, okay, let me just, all right. So I'm going to share this. Can you see this? Just asking right now, so you make sure you can see right now here is the natural resources playlist, which if you click on this, you can see that we've got let me keep this thing from playing because it'll do it again. It'll play it again for us. All right. So when you look at this, you can see we put everything that we do. There I am. All right. So when you look at the playlist, you can see that we've got a whole lot of different forums here, and we'll add it to that. This one, the one tonight, to that. And then I also wanted to show you the these are the next. This is one of our next forums. We've got that next Thursday, and we're so excited that we've got a partnership with the Human Rights Campaign to do this educational forum to help bring awareness to the devastating effects that our state government is having on LGBTQ and especially transgender children. And so we've got Carmarian D. Anderson Harvey, who's the director of the Human Rights Campaign for Alabama, as well as Dia Pope, who is director of civic engagement for the Take Resource Center out of Birmingham, and Victoria Kirby York, director of public programs out of the National Black Justice Coalition. And that is next week. We've also got, I was trying to show you all of it at one time, but on October the 14th, we have a program that is, just yesterday, our Secretary of State announced the adoption of this new program, AVID, which is replacing the ERIC system. We have a program planned for October 14th, which is a Saturday, with Mitchell Brown, who is from Auburn University. She is a political science professor, but also on the board of the Elections College, which is a nationally recognized organization at Auburn that teaches registrars and other elections officials about election administration. Adam Ambrogi from our National League office, who is also involved in the creation of the ERIC system. And then Sylvia Albert from Common Cause, who has been looking at she is an expert on the National Voter Registration Act, and also what's going to happen when all these states that are pulling out of ERIC. This is basically trying to talk about, what's going to happen, what we expect to happen. But now that we've got AVID, they're going to be digging in to understand what that system is and what it's not. And right now it's an incomplete work as far as we can tell. It's not where ERIC was, although it looks like it's trying to recreate ERIC. And then we also have a program in early November, which is a partnership with the National Federation of the Blind of Alabama. And that is focusing on transportation issues for the people with disabilities. And Alabama Rise is going to be working with us on that one. And we're looking for a third panelist. I think we're looking at different organizations that have been focusing on transportation issues, but we're going to be especially focused on people with disabilities. And so we've got a couple of others that I don't have all the information yet, but tonight is just with the environmental topics. This is just one of many educational opportunities where we feel like if people will work with us to understand these issues and then help us, all of us work together to try to find ways to hold our elected leaders accountable. And then when you go into the ballot box, if we've done our homework, we'll hopefully know more about, what people are going to, who we want to vote for. I did want to mention, I guess, Cindy, we're hoping one thing we're looking at doing after, we're going to be working with other leagues on trying to support environmental groups across the South. And so that's something that we haven't really jumped on yet because of the election that's going on for governors. The governor's race in Louisiana is holding up our partnership with the Louisiana League. But as you know, if I'm just telling you guys this to say that we are a member-driven organization, as far as what we do is limited on who's actually joined the league and who's willing to work on issues. So I would just encourage you guys, talk to Cindy and Nancy, and we've even had a couple of folks recently join that I know you recognize. If you're interested in working with us on environmental issues, please join us, and we would love to try to be able to do more than we've been able to do in the past, just because we're limited on resources. But I want to thank you again, and Julie, it's been a wonderful presentation, and I salute you. You are a hero.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.